one question. Why do you play video games? Although I'm sure that some people will say because they're bored, I'm sure that the most common answer will be to try to escape the real world for a moment. To be the best in something. To be your perfect self or something that you cannot be in real life. This escapism is the central theme in the PS Vita exclusive turn-based RPG the Caligula effect. In this game you play, you play yourself. You play a nameless silent protagonist you can name as yourself, which I obviously did. And no, you cannot play as a girl, so if you are a girl you cannot play as yourself. So this silent protagonist found himself in a virtual reality program called the Mobius. Here the players are forced to live their high school years in a loop. And you don't really like this, so you try to find your way home. It doesn't take long before you find other players with the same desire, and together you form a club, the Go Home Club. Along the way you learn more about the background of your club members and why they wanted to escape the Mobius. You help to battle their demons, and together you find your way back into the real world. This is, in very short, the story. It goes pretty deep, and maybe it's not too complicated, but the themes are very philosophical and apply to real world problems and dilemmas. I was surprised by this, because most games do not explore deep questions in heavy materials like this. What about the gameplay? Well, Caligula Effect has roughly 2 different gameplays. There are some big dungeons, and in between there are some short fragments in which you can explore your relationships with the other members of the Go Home Club. You can also befriend other NPCs, but I never really put any time in this. The main story was good enough for me. In the dungeon the game gives you quite a lot of freedom, in the sense that you do not have random encounters. Instead the enemies are patrolling, and when you do not walk too close to them, they won't attack. It's not that easy to avoid everyone, but I do advise to try to avoid most of the enemies, because otherwise you can take hours to get around, and there's quite a lot of backtracking in this game. Caligula Effect has a fighting system that is quite unique. It's a bit complicated to put into words, but in short, you can make combos with your attacks. So even when this is a turn-based game, because you can make a 3-hit combo with each of your 4 characters, you can bash most of the enemies with 1 turn in a 12-hit combo, if you have the timing right. This all seems very complicated. And yeah, well, it actually is. It took me quite a long time to get the hang of it. But when I found the right combination of characters and attacks, I could finish this game quite easily. The fighting system is good in theory, and it turned out to be really deep and enjoyable in practice as well. The other part of the gameplay, the visual novel part, on the other hand, is good in theory but very underdeveloped. More about this later. After you finish a dungeon or end a boss, you have a chance to talk to other members of the Go Home Club. You learn about their background and why they are in the Mobius and why they want to get out. Then I wanted to talk a bit about the graphics. I must say I didn't expect much from the graphics, because this is a Japanese RPG, and Japanese RPGs lately are not graphical powerhouses. I thought the graphics were decent, but very repetitive. The dungeons were varied in theme, but the endless hallways and bookcases get boring over time. I mean, I think the biggest library in the world is in this game, so many bookcases. There were some small glitches, clipping issues, and I kind of expected this. Anyway, all in all, the graphics were fine. The soundtrack on the other hand is amazing. Of course, it gets a bit repetitive, especially in the battle music. But the tracks are great. They often have voices, so they're not all instrumentals, and they're very enjoyable to listen, even outside of the game as well. And finally, the voices and the sound effects. About the voices I can be short, they're in Japanese only and they seem fine to me. But I always find it very hard to say if Japanese voices are well done or not. They all sound good to me. Anyway, it's good that there's at least voice acting. The sound effects are okay, they don't stand out, nor good nor bad. I'll come to the point here. I like Caligula Effect. I finished the whole 40+ hour game, but the game is sloppy. It seems that every good point has a bad side as well. I'll make an example here, the story. It's deep with a lot of nuances. It explores if you should give up a painful reality for an ideal but fake world. But the game has a serious story dip in the middle, where the plot isn't moving. That if you got invested in the beginning at all, because some parts of the plot just aren't very clear. It's much worse if you take the side stories in the visual novel part of the game. These are truly moving stories, that's not the problem. But the way they're shoehorned in and the fact that these sections feel very short makes them feel sloppy and almost unnecessary. One of the most important things in an RPG is the fighting system. And as stated before, this part is well done in the Caligula effect. The fighting system is well thought out, tactical and generally intelligent. You can experiment with different strategies and combos. It's fun. On the other hand though, it's complicated, difficult to get the hang with, and most importantly, poorly explained. Okay, the basics are explained, but the whole game I had the feeling that there should be more to it. I played this game for more than 40 hours, but if I wanted it, I could have easily tripled it. Because there's a huge endgame. There are several riddles spread through the game, several high-level enemies whose level was way higher than the level needed to defeat the end boss, and a few hundred NPCs who I could have recruited and leveled up. This all sounds great, but the game doesn't give you any good reason to do these quite tedious grinding jobs. Usually, I do not mind to do side quests, but only when they are rewarding to do so. My last point isn't so much a problem with the game, as well with playing the game. The Caligula effect is quite an obscure title, and there's hardly anything to find it online. This on its own isn't a very big problem, but since the in-game tutorials are vague, you can get stuck and do not know how to proceed. It happened to me 2 times in these 40 hours. I grew up in a time when there was very little internet, and in a way it was refreshing to go in almost blind. But I can imagine that modern gamers would not like this. They would like to at least have a thought that they can find the solution online when they're stuck. I can't say that Caligula Effect is a good game. It's not. It's an average but very interesting game. It could have been great, but the lack of polish makes it a rough affair. I can recommend it though if you have a PS Vita and like a game with a refreshing story, and if you do not mind to master complicated gameplay systems without any internet guides, relying just on vague in-game hints. So, this is my review of the Caligula Effect. There are some things that I want to add though. First of all, I did finally manage to record some gameplay from my PS Vita, so do expect some old Vita games that I will review that I played maybe even more than 2 years ago, but never could review because I didn't have the footage. Another thing that I want to say is that by now the Caligula Effect has been remastered for PS4 and maybe also I think also for PC, and this game is called Caligula Effect Overdrive. It's essentially the same game with a few more missions and a few more well, the graphics have a different engine, things like that. There are also some tweaks, but I'm not sure how that goes. I didn't play it, but it should be regarded as a remaster, even though it only came, how much? 1.5 years after the original game? Something like that. I didn't play it, but if you don't have a Vita and you want to play something like this on the PC or on the PS4, I would recommend the Caligula Effect Overdrive. There's also an anime about it. I didn't watch it. I heard that it was very boring. So anyway, play the Vita game. It's very good. Okay, this was the review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know and tell your friends about my channel. Have a great evening. Bye bye.